Get ready to embrace debate. First Take starts now.
Coming up on the First Take podcast, how will Chris Paul and the Clippers bounce back tonight against the Thunder? Plus, are the Heat better or worse than last year? We asked NBA great Isaiah Thomas. And will Steve Kerr regret choosing the Warriors over the Knicks? All that and more coming up on the First Take podcast, which starts right now. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to First Take. Kerry champion Skip Bayless in studio. Stephen A. Smith in studio in Los Angeles.
Not again.
Again.
Blame the Clippers, man. What you want me to do?
Blame the Clippers. Yeah,
What
you're thanking the Clippers is what you're doing.
Well,
Thank you, Clippers. You got me to L.A. again.
Man, I had to rush here. I literally didn't get here until 6 hours ago. I even forgot my glasses. I even forgot my glasses.
I feel so sorry for you. As it rains in dreary Bristol.
I'm in the house. Oh, it's raining
yes.
here.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
It's a little chilly.
Gray, muggy.
Yeah.
Precipitation, the normal. Yeah. Enjoy that sun in Los Angeles. Coming up on the show today, folks, we're really excited. One of the greatest point guards to ever play the game, Isaiah Thomas, will join the desk.
No.
Yes.
Here?
He's going to be here for the whole show. In studio. And you're not even here, Stephen A.
Well, you know what, Isaiah, listen, y'all going to have to get over that. Isaiah and I talk all the time. He ain't going to miss me. He's not going to miss me.
Okay.
He'll be all right.
Yeah,
Skip still for him.
Yeah.
We'll get his takes on the stars and superstars of today. Obviously, the playoffs and everything basketball related. Plus, the Heat move on to the East Finals once again. But are they even better than they were last year? That is the discussion. We will talk about it coming up a little later. But first, Game 6 for Stephen A. is Thunder's Clippers. After the controversial end to Game 5, which the NBA says the refs got it right, by the way, Clippers look to bounce back and even the series. Chris Paul took the blame for the loss. And Stephen A., you said you think CP3 will have a huge game tonight. You're there, obviously, covering the game for the network. Tell me, who do you think will win?
Well, I think the Clippers are going to win tonight. I originally picked the Oklahoma City Thunder to win this series in 7 games, and I stand by that. I definitely think that Chris Paul, he's a pit bull. He's got an incredible amount of pride. He knows that the last game was on him. That's one of the few times in his career, the only time you can legitimately say that a loss was on him, like solely. I mean, practically, considering the fact that the Clippers fell apart in the waning moments, particularly the last 4 minutes of that game, and how your floor general and your floor leader is supposed to keep everybody composed, under control, and run the offense in an adroit fashion. That's not something that he did. And as a result, the Los Angeles Clippers blew a game they clearly should have won. They know they should be here up 3-2 instead of down 3-2, but it is what it is. And as a result of that, with their season on the line, I think you're going to see Chris Paul, respond like the superstar point guard he is. He will have a big-time game tonight.
That debate coming up later.
And I think, listen, and not only that, there will be a DeAndre Jordan sighting. If it were not for his free throw shooting, he would be in the games in fourth quarters. I think he would be incredibly formidable. He'd have a profound impact, and he'd be establishing himself as the best big man in the game if the man could hit free throws. But because he can't, they can't have him out on the floor in the waning moments. And as a result, it takes a lot away from the Clippers defensively. But I think he shows up in front of this home crowd, galvanized by their support tonight. I think DeAndre Jordan is going to have a big-time game in terms of rebounds and block shots. I think Blake Griffin's going to be Blake Griffin. I think Chris Paul is going to elevate to another level. And I think the Clippers it's going to be a thriller. But I think the Clippers pull out the victory and they force a Game 7 back in Oklahoma City this weekend.
I very much disagree with everything you just said. But before I get into my prediction, allow me to declare and disqualify myself on national TV.
Oh.
As a Spurs guy, as you well know, I am rooting like crazy for the Clippers to not only extend the series tonight, but to win a Game 7. Not only do I need some rest for my Spurs now, but I'm here to tell you, I readily admit, I think the Clippers are a little easier matchup for my Spurs than Oklahoma City is. And as we all know, Oklahoma City swept my Spurs during the regular season 4-0. And it's now 7 straight games that Oklahoma City has won at home against my Spurs, dating back to the playoffs 2 years ago when they got blown off the floor in my hometown of Oklahoma City. So that's my heart. My heart says I do not need Chris Paul to turn back into Cliff Paul in the last minutes of this game tonight. I need CP3. I don't need CP0 tonight. Chris, please help me. Do me a little favor here. Make up for Game 5 with a Game 6 for the ages back home in Clipperland. Now, here's my heart. Oklahoma City will finish off this series tonight. I'm straight from my heart. My head, I should say. No more heart here. My head says Oklahoma City because Oklahoma City is better than the Clippers. I think they've been better every game, and I'm going to say it again. The only team that can beat the Thunder is the Thunder. And I do not think that Kevin Durant will shoot 6 for 22 as he did in Game 5 back in Oklahoma City. You know he's going to be a little hotter than that, Stephen A. And now for my closing case. Do you realize against the Clippers that Kevin Durant's running mate has looked a lot more like the MVP than Kevin Durant has? This has been Russell Westbrook's coming out party, man, because in these 5 games he has played the greatest stretch of basketball in his career. The most consistent, controlled stretch of basketball I have ever seen him play over a 5-game period. And he's shooting 52% from the field, 41% from 3 in these 5 games, 88% from the free throw line, thanks in part to those 3 for 3 that he made standing alone at the line to help win Game 5. And he has torched Chris Paul. He has torched anyone who has dared to get in his way in this series. So I don't think they can handle Russell Westbrook. I don't think they have an answer for him. I don't know that there's a defensive switch that Doc can make to control Russell Westbrook, who can get into the paint anytime he so desires. He can create shots for himself and for his running mate, who I think is more Robin than Batman, as I've told you all along. I think this series will belong to Russell Westbrook, and then I'll have to close my eyes and hope the Thunder figure out a way to beat themselves against my Spurs.
First of all, stop trying to figure out new ways to be disrespectful to the reigning league MVP. That's number one. Number two, Russell Westbrook coming out party or no coming out party, averaging 29, 6, and 6. This guy has been unstoppable for the last couple of years. He's unstoppable now. But here's the impediment that you didn't bring up about Oklahoma City. When Russell Westbrook gets on a tear, he's so electric. You see guys spectating. And that's when they really slip. The Oklahoma City Thunder are at their best when they're sharing and distributing the basketball. They're not at their best when Russell Westbrook goes berserk, and that's it. Perfect example, if you remember Skip Bayless, a couple of years ago, NBA Finals. Russell Westbrook, I forgot whether it was game 3 or 4, literally went berserk. I mean, what an unstoppable performance he put on display against the Miami Heat. What happened? They lost anyway. When they win basketball games, it's when the Derek Fishers, the Caron Butlers, the Reggie Jacksons of the world, it's the Serge Ibakas, join Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant in making shots. Serge Ibaka can't attempt 5 shots in a game, and you can expect to win. They'll be in the game. They'll be competitive. But in order to win, everybody's got to be involved. And when Russell Westbrook goes off, these guys do have a tendency from time to time to turn around, stand around and spectate because they're marveling at his exploits. We can understand it because I told you, he's the most athletic point guard I've ever seen in NBA history. The only person that rivals him is Derrick Rose. That's how athletic Russell Westbrook is. He's just unbelievable in that regard. And he's unstoppable one-on-one. But you're going to need more than that to win a game of this magnitude. I could see Russell Westbrook dropping 40 tonight, and they still lose.
Wow. Well, so that means KD would drop 22? You think he could drop 35?
I could see Russell Westbrook and KD combining for 75 points, and they still lose the game.
I cannot.
I can see that. I can see that happening. I'm saying to you, I still have them winning this series because, again, you've got to be able to go through that free throw line and bury shots. And in order for the Clippers to do it, they can't have DeAndre Jordan in the game in the fourth quarter. And if you don't have him in the game, then it's a clear path. It's like running down an empty streets on Broadway for a layup for Oklahoma City. You need DeAndre Jordan in that game. but he has to be able to hit free throws. And because he can't, you can't have him on the floor. And if you can't have him on the floor, you're not going to be able to stop Oklahoma City. But I do think tonight, in front of the home crowd, they can find a way. Plus, let's keep in mind, Skip, they'll get some calls in their favor.
Oh.
They're on their home court. It's a game 6. Doc Rivers just finished complaining in game 5.
By the way,
all of that going
when is he
on.
going to get fined for that?
He's not.
Well,
Maybe not.
Trust me when I tell you, a fine is probably coming. But then again, he didn't sit there. You got to remember, too, it could be tricky because he didn't sit there and say, this referee is horrible or that referee, they were awful. He said the wrong call was made. That's different than blasting the referees. He's talking about the wrong call was made on that particular point as opposed to their overall performance. So he could get away with it, even though I suspect the league might still fine him.
Okay, last quick point. Since I, quote-unquote, disrespected the new MVP.
Yes, you did.
Who has been the MVP through the first 5 games of this Clippers-Thunder series, Mr. Smith?
For the most part, Russell Westbrook.
Thank you. Next question.
Oh, you are something.
I rest my case.
You are something.
Nope. Is that disrespect? I just said he has looked more like the MVP
Skip,
than the MVP,
Skip,
and he just agreed with me. Thank you very much. Next question.
We have one of the greatest point guards in NBA history and a Hall of Famer coming on the show who deferred quite a bit in his NBA career when other guys got hot. So stop it.
We're going to talk
about that.
That's a whole different animal over there.
Let's move on, shall we? Skip says the Clippers will win tonight. Skip says OKC will win tonight.
I do. It's over.
Stephen A. says the Clippers. Last night, David Aldridge tweeted, "Stunner. Steve Kerr is headed to Golden State after a month of speculation. Reports said that Kerr was just about to finalize a deal with the Knicks, but yet he reverses coast. He went from the East to the West, and this is what Kerr had to say. Ultimately, it was agonizing to say no to Phil because of what I think of him and what he's done for my career. I think they're going to turn it around, but it's going to be a big undertaking, and it's going to take time. The idea of doing that 3,000 miles from home, it just didn't feel right. The biggest thing for me is I want to be happy every day. I want to be in partnership with the people on the team. And the one thing that a lot of the coaches that I talked to said was, you have to have talent. And Golden State, no arguing here, that's talent." Stephen A. Smith, surprised by this decision?
Not at all. And let's keep in mind that my friend David Aldridge for TNT was being totally facetious because there was no surprise here. And if anybody knows that, it's one of the ultimate NBA insiders in David Aldridge. But this was a no-brainer. You have an opportunity to choose between New York. Yes, Phil Jackson is there, but it's still a dysfunctional franchise. It's haphazard. Carmelo isn't sure about it. An abundance of their players aren't sure about it. The city of New York isn't sure about it. A matter of fact, the only thing we're sure about is how dysfunctional it is. And obviously they're cap-strapped, and, it's a rebuilding and a reclamation project that's going to be years in the making. On the other hand, you look at Golden State and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, you have arguably the greatest shooting backcourt in NBA history. In Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, Harrison Barnes, you've got talent there. Even when Bogut doesn't want to be bogus, he can give you something in terms of a big man presence. And the city is probably the best home crowd in existence at this moment in time. And regardless of what I consider to be their foolish decision to let go of Mark Jackson, there's no denying that the Golden State Warriors ownership are a bunch of guys that care a great deal about winning. They care a great deal about their franchise. They do have some knowledge about what they're doing. I don't agree with their decision to let go of Mark Jackson, but it doesn't mean they deserve our disrespect. So in the end, it was a clear decision, not to mention the fact, as Adrian Wojnarowski for Yahoo Sports reported, and he's absolutely right, Phil Jackson and the New York Knicks didn't want to guarantee Steve Kerr's 4th year until the 11th hour. They kept giving a 3-year deal. Now, that has James Dolan written all over it, because if that's Phil Jackson's man and there was no plan B, why the hell would Phil Jackson care about a 4th year? It ain't his money. It's got to be Dolan that stepped into the fray and was procrastinating on guaranteeing a 4th year for Kerr, where Golden State was willing to give him the 5 years, $25 million deal, and they're only a 55-minute flight from his home in San Diego with his lovely wife and family. So all of those things being considered, it was a relatively easy decision. My dismay is not that Steve Kerr got the job. I think he deserves an opportunity to coach on this level. I actually think he's going to do a good job, and he's an incredibly nice man, so I wish him luck. My problem is that he had his pick of the litter, it appeared, when he's never coached a day in his life. It is not something that I see happen for black coaches. And Skip, in case you haven't noticed, there's a few people losing their jobs. And the people that are replacing them, none of them happen to be black. Stan Van Gundy in Detroit, Steve Kerr in Golden State, the list goes on and on.
Yep.
We're seeing black coaches fall by the wayside, but I'm not hearing Lionel Holland's name. This man went to the Western Conference Finals last year. Not even a sniff. I'm thinking about stuff like that.
I read his name affiliated with the Lakers search, I think.
Yes,
yesterday.
It better be.
Okay.
It should be. It should be.
Okay.
We'll see.
Back to Kerry's original question. Surprised. I was very surprised. I know David a little bit, maybe not as well as you do, but I'm not sure he's being facetious about that. And I know you were traveling, but in watching the Inside the NBA segments, halftime, postgame, Ernie, Shaq, Kenny, Charles, they all voiced surprise about this. I think most people thought that Steve Kerr would wind up with his mentor Phil in New York. And it was only a matter of time, as the reports earlier this week indicated, that they would finally reach some agreement and break through their impasse over 4 versus 5 years, that it was a matter of negotiation getting finished. So I'm shocked by this only because I still think the Phil job was a safer and better job for Steve than this job. I'm going to say it again. Mark Jackson is going to be a tough act to follow in Golden State. As you pointed out many times, Stephen A., this was his 3rd year there. 2 years ago, of course, they went 47-35, beat Denver 4-2 in the first round of the playoffs, lost to San Antonio in the second round 4-2. And this year, they up it to 51-31 and take the Clippers to 7 games. Pretty good. Hey, pretty great. I still don't get it. I'm not sure that locker room gets it. Steve Kerr, as we all know, terrific basketball mind, great guy. That may be his strongest point, is what a great guy he is. But at the first sign of trouble next regular season, first 2-game, 3-game losing streak, you know where the criticism is going to be aimed? At the new head coach. Oh, no more Mark Jackson. New coach Steve Kerr has never coached a dribble in his life. Wow, he's going to be on the hot seat pretty quickly there, even though he's got the blessing, obviously, the owner and the CEO and the GM. They love him. But do the players love him? Because we know they love Mark Jackson. So that's why I thought this job's a little dicier. In the Western Conference, I know what you say about the backcourt shooting tandem. I don't know if they're the greatest ever, but they're really good. And I know if Bogut is right, it'll make them a little bit better. But they're in the West. And if Melo does decide to stay with Phil in the East, I'm not going to write them off. And I'm not going to say that couldn't be a much quicker rebuild, quote unquote, than you're talking about. I don't know that it's death and destruction of the Knicks.
Well, it's a couple of things to consider. Maybe, one of the things that Kerr would have had to do was participate in the recruiting of Carmelo Anthony. And if you're Carmelo Anthony, you're asking yourself, Phil Jackson coached Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen to world championships.
Sure.
He coached Shaq and Kobe to world championships. He came out of retirement to coach Kobe, Gasol, and Bynum to championships. And on top of it all, he was willing to come out of retirement again just a year and a half ago with suspect health compared to what it is now and coach the Lakers again. So if you're not willing to coach Carmelo Anthony, what does that say? And if you're Steve Kerr, you're thinking, is Carmelo Anthony really going to want to stay to play for me? That's a legitimate question. Secondly, you got Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, like I said. Think about the comparison. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, no disrespect whatsoever, but that's a better option than Raymond Felton and J.R. Smith or Iman Shumpert. It's just a fact. Yeah. And so when you look at it from that perspective, that's even more attractive. Then you combine it with the reality that the Knicks organization, if you're fighting over a 4th guaranteed year, you know if you're Steve Kerr, that's not Phil Jackson. You know that's got to be James Dolan. Now, I haven't spoken to Knicks, so I can't verify that officially in this capacity. But, I mean, it's common sense. It walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. It ain't a damn mongoose. If you're Phil Jackson, you're not going to care about guaranteeing Steve Kerr a 4th year if that's your guy. But you're Dolan, and that's the position you took. So, in the end, it is what it is, but here's what it comes down to, y'all. Phil Jackson should pick up the phone right now and call Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson, former Rookie of the Year for the New York Knicks, former a star at St. John's University that helped the team to the Final Four, coming off the bench as a sixth man, by the way. Guy that is from O'Connell Park right there in Queens, just a few blocks away from where I grew up. This dude is a local product. You can't talk about Derek Fisher or Kurt Rambis, whose wife works for the Lakers, and he's a Laker. And nobody wants to say, we respect Kurt Rambis. He's a member of the ESPN family. He worked with us. But we don't care about seeing him as a coach in New York. Maybe L.A., but not New York.
Okay.
So when you talk about New York, Phil Jackson, who's been telling everybody he's going to be working with the team, he's going to be a part of their training camp, what he needs to do is pick up the phone and call Mark Jackson, because you got to win that pre- and post-game locker room, as I pointed out in my column, which is right now on ESPNNewYork.com. You got to win the pre- and the post-game locker room. You got to win the media. You got to have somebody that's going to galvanize the city of New York and make you want to support this franchise. Mark Jackson is the man for this job, and Phil Jackson should be on the phone with him today.
Here's the point, and I did read your column. It's excellent. I highly recommend it to everyone. It's up on ESPNNewYork.com right now. Here's the problem with your scenario. Mark Jackson and Melo, great fit. Would be a big reason I believe Melo would stay in New York. Mark Jackson and Phil Jackson, no good. Bad fit. Not the right mix of personalities and egos. Mark is his own man. We know Phil is his own man. I don't think Phil would want any part of Mark, because Mark would want to coach in a different direction than Phil would want to coach from above. So Steve Kerr, perfect extension on the floor from Phil Jackson. Mark Jackson, own guy, different direction. No good.
Here's why I disagree with that, Skip. I think we need to show Mark Jackson a certain level of respect when it comes to being a subordinate. Yes, he's his own man, but he understands his job title and his job description. Phil is the president of basketball operations. Now, if Phil's an owner that's just cutting a check, has absolutely nothing to do with basketball operations, and you hired this man to be the coach, then that's different. Yeah. But everybody knows that Phil Jackson, at any moment that he wants to, can come and coach this team, and the New York Knicks are not going to resist, because they've handed him complete autonomy over basketball operations. You combine that with the fact that he doesn't want to coach, that supposedly he was willing to teach the triangle and what have you, and he's going to be a part of training camp or whatever. You have to remember that there's nothing wrong with sitting there and showing Mark Jackson the triangle and letting him know this is something that you want implemented. Mark Jackson's not going to be insubordinate and do that. Where Mark Jackson is going to have a problem is that if you hire him to do a job, you instruct him as to what his job description is, and then you try to change it because you just feel like it. That's what he's going to have a problem with.
You know this as well as I do. The triangle is a very complex offense, and you can't just say, hey, here's how you do it in one day. It's hard for Mark Jackson to teach something that Phil Jackson has lived with his whole life and Steve played in.
But Skip, if you're saying that, then what you're saying is we only got three candidates: Derek Fisher, Kurt Rambis, or Jim Clemens. Or Jim Clemens.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. I mean, because who else is running the triangle?
Well,
listen,
you got it.
I am a fan of Jim Clemens, who's been a long-time assistant under Phil Jackson for many years. I think he got screwed over. I think he should be on somebody's bench in the NBA. But he can't come to New York as the head coach. We'd eat him alive.
Yeah, because Derek Fisher could do it.
Yeah, that'd be easy.
Well,
that was a name.
I guess so.
That was a name.
I'm not going to rule that out.
So what's next for the Knicks? A topic that we will discuss at the top of the hour when we bring in our guest. Quickly, Stephen A., the name of the column is Press Phil. Get Mark Jackson on line 1, ESPNNewYork.com. Check it out, ladies and gentlemen. Our next guest was the second pick in the 1981 NBA draft and the heart of the Bad Boy Pistons. He also spent 5 years as a coach for the Pacers and the Knicks. We welcome in Hall of Famer Isaiah Thomas to the desk. We're so happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here. What's up, Stephen A?
What's going on? What's going on, my man?
You know I got to hit you on the beef jerky commercial. You know, everybody else, when their first endorsement is either a car, you know, gym shoes, you know, clothes.
Sure.
You get a beef jerky.
Hey. It's not my first endorsement. I've had others, but you know what? It tastes good. And remember, like it says in the commercial, you get out what you put in.
Oh, okay. I don't know what that means exactly. So you just said a minute ago, Skip can go to every barbershop there is.
No, Skip is big in the barbershop. And he's definitely got, you know, street cred. He and Lambeer now, y'all can come to the west side of Chicago, y'all can come to Detroit, y'all can walk through the neighborhood, and everybody will give you a shout out.
I think I would need you at my side, though.
No, they like you.
Okay?
You be all right. Because you know
we need to take this show to a barbershop.
That would be good.
We do.
No, y'all really do. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
Y'all definitely should do it from a barbershop, but not Stephen A's barber.
Oh, no. We won't do that. Stephen A., he is capping. Like,
Shots fired! Shots fired! I'm not going to tell the world that our hairlines are identical right now, but it's all right. That's all right.
I'm proud of mine. You know, as they say, it comes with age.
So let's talk about the playoffs. Heat closed out Game 5 yesterday, folks. It was on a 13-3 run within the last 2 minutes and 48 seconds. And we want to ask you this, because this is the 4th straight time that the Heat, they've made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The last time that was done, it was the Pistons. They did it 6 straight times from 2003 to 2008. So, Isaiah, obviously the question's for you. All things playoffs, all things basketball, since you're sitting with us. Are the Heat better this year than they were last year?
Well, if you're comparing the Heat to the Heat, then no, they're not.
Okay.
However, if you're comparing the Heat to the competition that's in the East right now, then they're better. Because the rest of the field is not as good as they were last year. The Pacers is not as good as they were last year. Other teams have fallen off in the East. But if you're comparing them to themselves, then they're not as good. And that's always the problem with the champion. And that's when you know things are kind of on the downside, because when they start comparing you to you, then you can't win that argument. You know, the old you against the new you, you know, you can't win that argument.
Okay,
right now, it's a battle between
What is
themselves.
worse right now on the Heat? What area is worse than last year?
Well, when you look at the Heat right now, their productivity out of Ray Allen, their consistency out of Dwayne Wade, they're not as potent as an offensive team as they have been in the past. Dwayne Wade normally could take over a game by himself. He can't do that anymore because of his injuries. You may be able to get one game out of him in the series. You used to be able to get 2 or 3 where he would dominate and
They
take
got
over.
a half out of him last night. They got 20 in the first half. Then he kind of tailed off.
So LeBron, the good thing about LeBron is he can elevate to another level. He can push the button and go to that 40-point performance. Doesn't want to go there all the time, but when he needs to, he does.
Yeah. Stephen A.
My issue when I look at the Miami Heat, Zeke, I look at LeBron James, and more than ever before, I see moments where he's tired.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think that Miami, even though that's not the case in the East, when we talk about the finals, they could be in some trouble regardless of who they face, although I believe the best opponent that has a shot at beating them is San Antonio, even though San Antonio's kryptonite is OKC. I do believe that Miami's vulnerable because even though it's the finals and, you know, you don't have back-to-backs and, you know, your best supposedly will come out, I've looked at LeBron this year, and there have been more times throughout this season than I've ever seen in his career where he just seems a bit fatigued. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely, and rightfully so. I mean, he and the Heat, they are a mentally, physically fatigued basketball team because they've had to climb the mountain so many times. And for the Heat right now, there are no more big moments. There are no more big games. Like, how do you get up? How do you find that extra momentum? And if you remember, Jordan was masterful at this because he would create a problem that would motivate him. And what the Heat has to find right now, they need to find an enemy. They need to find someone who really challenges them and push that button. So you'll see when, like they had to win in New Jersey the other night. They had to win in Brooklyn the other night.
Right.
where LeBron had to elevate and get 49 points. That was a big moment. That was a big game, and they could find the extra energy and intensity that they needed to get over the hump, and he could. But when you're trying to win championships at the level and at the pace that he's trying to win them at, it's very exhausting mentally and physically. You're playing all the way until June every year while everyone else is resting. And then don't forget, he's also been involved in international competition. So physically, mentally, he's definitely exhausted. However, what he's doing right now definitely says he's the king, he's the best because of all the exhaustion that he's experiencing, but yet he's still able to elevate himself and his team and win the game. Now, he's not Mike Tyson. They're not knocking people out. Right now, they Sugar Ray Leonard. They're winning on points and rounds.
Okay, Isaiah, gut feeling at this moment, can they three-peat?
Yes, they
will
can.
they three-peat?
I believe they can three-peat because they're the champs.
Yep.
I think if OKC beats the Clippers, and then you got the Clippers, and then you got San Antonio against the Clippers.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough matchup, and one of those teams are going to come out physically and mentally exhausted themselves. Miami having to face an Indiana team, we don't know where Indiana's going to come in or where Washington's going to come in. We're not sure. So I think Miami can get to the finals and be mentally and physically healthy.
Okay, let me say, Stephen A., before you go on, I was highly impressed with the Heat last night in the last 5 minutes because I still believe, I agree with everything you just said, insightful points, but on cue, when absolutely necessary, I saw last year's Heat and the year before's Heat in the last 5 minutes last night, and it knocked me back in my chair because that was Sugar Ray taking, Hagler's best shot and then saying, oh yeah, watch this. Yeah. And Joe Johnson was completely on some other planet last night. I've never seen such a shooting display. It was nothing but net every time, and a bunch of them were in LeBron's face. And all of a sudden, in the last 5 minutes, LeBron said no to Joe Johnson. It was highly impressive. LeBron can perimeter defend with anybody in this league when he locks down and reaches down for whatever extra energy is going to be required. Yeah. And when he took Joe Johnson out of the game, he took the Nets out of the game. And then right on cue, when it was absolutely time, LeBron hit a big three, Bosh hit a big three, and Ray Allen hit a huge three because they are highly capable of doing that. They always get out-rebounded, but they make the right shots, and then it got to the end. The Nets couldn't even get the ball in bounds against them because team defensively, they're still, I think they're the best when they decide to be the best, when they need and have to be the best.
Well, when you say they were at their best, you're not at your best when Darren Williams ain't at his best. If Darren Williams had showed up and played the way he's capable of playing, with Joe Johnson doing what he did, might have been a different outcome. You need both. Joe Johnson did the best that he could, but that's not what, he did more than his job description requires. And you needed his point guard, his $98 million franchise player point guard, to step up and show up, and it didn't happen.
Stephen A., when has Darren Williams ever showed up when it was time?
Well, I guess for me, Skip, I'm looking at a guy that when he was in Utah, I saw a big-time player. I'm looking at a guy that was in the conversation with Chris Paul, and, Tim Legler said it best to me yesterday, Zeke. He said to me, there was a time when you talked about the elite point guards in the game, it was Chris Paul, Darren Williams, who would you take? He said now, you can go 12, 13 deep before you even get to Darren Williams' name. That's unbelievable.
Darren Williams is a system player. He's great in Jerry Sloan's offense, which was a two-guard offense.
Which he hated, by the way.
Yeah, but he's a system player. He played in Illinois. When he played at Illinois in college, he played in the system. He would be great in the triangle in the system. There are some guards who are really good in systems, and he's probably one of the best guards in the league in the system. However, when you take him out of a system and he becomes a play caller where we have to set up,
create something,
then he's not as good.
Yeah.
So as a coach, you really have to find the right system for him. Jason Kidd was a good two-way player. He can set up, call plays, he can run an offense, but then when he was with Byron Scott, he can also play in the Princeton system.
Yep.
So his intellect, the way he passed, the way he thought about the game, it could fit a system, and it can also fit set-up basketball. Darren Williams fits a system. He's not set-up basketball.
You used the word superstar in front of Chris Paul's
Point
name.
guard.
I'm sorry, does not qualify. If you are a superstar, you get your team home with that win. Chris Paul was at the center of a collapse that lost the series, I think, for the Clippers. What have I called him? CP0, because he has 0 rings. It's not disrespect, it's the truth.
Yeah.
9 years without a ring, not even getting out of the second round. I see a guy who whines too much, who flops too much, who instigates too much, who tries to get under the skin of the other team too much, and doesn't lead his team enough. That was a crucial point in Chris Paul's career in the NBA.
It happens to everybody.
It's happened regularly to Chris Paul.
No.
Lots of experience, not much to show for it.
Welcome back to First Take. And while Skip refuses to call CP3 a superstar, Stephen A. always says he's a superstar point guard, a floor general that deserves to be considered. Why not ask one of the greats, what is a superstar point guard? Isaiah Thomas, we need you to weigh in on this. Is CP3 a star or a superstar?
Well, first of all, I have to give you the criteria in terms of the way I'm judging superstar and star. For me, superstar is a guy who has won championships. So to me, Magic Johnson was a superstar when I came into the league. Dr. J was a superstar when I came into the league. When Michael Jordan and I came into the league, we were stars. People wanted to see us play. We sold out buildings. We signed autographs. We had endorsements, commercials, so forth and so on. But the superstar level, you know, the Larry Bird level, the Bob Cousy level, that was always, you know, a level for the champions. And when we look at champions now in the game of the NBA, Tony Parker's a superstar. Tim Duncan's a superstar. LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, those are the guys who are superstars. So it's like the star, the superstar line has become very murky. The champion, great player, good team, all that's become murky and muddy. And Stephen A., you and I have had this conversation numerous times where the bar has been lowered.
Yep.
So everybody can kind of fit in the constructed box. And we need to raise the bar up where the champion is given the respect that he or she is due. And since there's no level higher than the superstar, the superstar level to me is reserved for the champion.
Now, Skip, let me explain something to you here about Isaiah Thomas. I don't disagree with anything that he said, although it would appear to based on the arguments that you and I had. But when you and I are debating it, what I would say to you is that there have been plenty of dudes that have been labeled superstars that hadn't won rings. And so when I look at a point guard and I look at what CP3 brings to the table, to me, he qualifies. But when you look at the criteria that Isaiah has, based on where Isaiah has come from, then it resonates with me in a different fashion, and I have no problem with what he's saying, because Isaiah and I have been talking about this for years, not even debating, because I've had to be humbled by his level of expertise on this level. And correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm speaking out of turn, Zeke, one of the things that Isaiah has always had an issue with, Skip, along with many Hall of Famers that have spoken to me both publicly and privately about this, is that guys make incredible sacrifices along the journey in order to capture world championships. And when they do that while being stars, it's actually offensive to them that somebody who has never won a championship is mentioned in the same breath as them because they consider it a different category. So when I'm sitting up here and I'm debating or discussing this with a Hall of Famer who feels that way, that's entirely different than you and I, Skip, going back and forth about it. Because when I'm talking about CP3, I'm simply talking about a standard that so many people have thrown out there towards guys who haven't won championships. Whereas Isaiah and many other Hall of Famers are saying, not only were we stars, but we were champions too. And those who are stars but have never been champions don't belong in the same class as us. I get where a Hall of Famer is coming from on that level. I just don't believe anybody else has a right to come from that perspective. Did I speak out of turn, Z?
Time out. Time out. So what you just said was, just because the great Isaiah Thomas just validated everything I have argued against you, then it's okay. Then I'm right today because Isaiah said I'm right, but tomorrow I'll be wrong because Isaiah won't be here anymore.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you're wrong because there are people that you have ordained stars who hadn't won yet. And I'm saying to you, he's a Hall of Famer who won. So if his criteria is based on what he has accomplished, then there's validity to that as opposed to somebody that'll sit there and nitpick. Listen, was Akeem Olajuwon not considered a superstar before he won a title? I think he was.
Yeah,
Dwayne Wade, en route to winning the championship before he captured it in 2006. There were people who were calling him that. Now, Isaiah and other Hall of Famers may have said, give me the ring first. LeBron James was considered a superstar before he won a title. Shaq was a superstar before he won a title. So I'm just saying to you, from us, I think Hall of Famers have a right to come from a different and fresh perspective. I don't think Skip has the right to sit there and act like he's one of the Hall of Famers.
Even if I say exactly what Isaiah says, I'm disqualified because it's just me. Okay? Now, back to Chris Paul. Let's stay on Chris Paul.
Yes.
Remember my argument. Chris Paul hasn't even knocked on the door of winning a championship. 9 years in the league, never out of the second round of the playoffs. Again, I'm holding him to your standards, which is superstars, the highest standards, as Isaiah was just discussing.
Point guard.
Okay, don't try to disqualify him as a point guard. You said superstar.
Point
Isaiah
guard.
Thomas right now is 22-30 in his postseason career. Only 3 times in 9 years has he even gotten to the second round, never out of the second round.
Wait. I was never 22-30. You said Isaiah Thomas was 22-30.
You meant Chris Paul.
Time out, Coach.
Juggle a lot of balls.
Coach, time out.
Chris Paul is, we should look up your playoff record and put it up against 22-30 because I think it would be quite the opposite of 22-30. Think about that, 22-30. And we nitpick now because you're forcing me into a corner. I'm going to say it again. At the biggest moments of Chris Paul's career, even though he's only a 6-foot-tall point guard, Game 7 against a Spurs team that wasn't nearly as good as this year's Spurs team, back in New Orleans when he had Tyson Chandler, David West, Pasha, Mo Pete, still pretty good team. Nope, at home in New Orleans, didn't get it done. Then against the Spurs that actually got blown out by Oklahoma City 4 times in a row 2 years ago, that Spurs team swept Chris Paul's team. And now this, the other night, that was the pivotal game in this series. And you don't just commit one blunder, you have 3 late blunders in the last 13 seconds that, as you say, cost
a bad loss.
Okay? Again, did I ever see Isaiah Thomas do that? I don't. You say everybody has a night like that. I'm not sure Isaiah ever had a night like that. Just for the record. This is horrendous. This is where you just lose.
Well, my last point, Zeke, is this. All I'm trying to say to Skip is that if you're a 6-foot point guard, what I'm talking about, when I look at a point guard, I look at floor generalship. I don't just look at somebody's ability to score and assist and defend, but I also look at their ability to be an extension of the coach on the floor or the coach on the floor to run a basketball team, to be an orchestrator. I look at a superstar category like LeBron and KD and guys like that and Kobe in a different category. But the reason why I keep emphasizing point guard is because of somebody's ability to run a show. And that's what I'm talking about with Chris Paul. Right?
If that's the criteria, then, you know, he's number one. He's the premier under that criteria. But again, for me, the champion has been, the bar has been lowered, and I would like to elevate the bar again, where you have to win to be considered super in this league, as opposed to everyone can be considered super.
Okay.
Okay.
And final point, Stephen A., and you agreed with me on this. Big picture perspective. Chris Paul has become a commercial-making superstar. He's becoming very well known for great commercials. Cliff Paul commercials. They make one after another. They're relentlessly played, and I never get tired of them. But he's becoming overhyped from his commercial fame as opposed to his basketball production. That's just me, and I'm with you. You're cheapening the term superstar if you start to toss it around to Chris Paul. That's just me.
Bottom line, Skip, if I am a team and I'm looking for a floor general, there's nobody in the NBA right now, maybe outside of Tony Parker, that I would want more than Chris Paul.
Our researcher just handed this to me. Isaiah Thomas playoff record 70-41.
70-41 versus 22-30.
Isaiah played with a good team too, though.
Wait, hold
Chris
it.
Paul hasn't had a good
Hold it. Yeah,
What?
Yeah, I played with a good team, but
You a bad boy.
yeah, but again, all these guys are playing with great players. You can't underestimate the players that they're playing with. So I'm just saying, and just like I said it to you on the phone, stop lowering the bar. These guys got to do it. They got to win.
I agree with that.
When I
Come
came
on now.
into the NBA,
You know I
it
agree
was
with
like
you there.
it was like
You
Isaiah
know I agree
Thomas.
with you there.
You good. You scoring a lot of points. You getting a lot of assists. But you was on me, Skip Bayless, saying you got to win a championship. If you don't win a championship,
You're not
at this
superstar.
level. And we was on LeBron
I feel you.
James
I
really
feel you.
hard about you got to win the championship.
Well,
If
Zeke, I
LeBron
feel you
James
on-
didn't win
I
the
feel you on that.
championship.
But who's he lose? Who's he lost to? He lost to Shaq and Kobe. He lost to Kobe and Gasol.
Wait.
and Bird. He
I
lost
had to
Tim
be
Duncan and
Jordan,
them.
Bird, Magic, and Kareem.
Talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
And take you eventually won.
We're having church today, folks. With a little over 8 minutes remaining in the second quarter of last night's game, Tony Parker leads the closeout game against the Trailblazers with what the Spurs announced was a tightness in his left hamstring. The Spurs went on to win convincingly, 104-82. The players said they weren't concerned about Parker at all, and if he was hurt, no, not really. He'd be ready to go for the finals. We asked this question. Isaiah Thomas still hanging out. We appreciate it. Skip Bayless, how concerned are you about Tony Parker?
Just so Isaiah gets this, I am the Spurs supporter on this show, and I have no idea how concerned to be, because we're about to discuss a subject that was once dear to your heart, and it's playing through injuries. How hurt is a player? I don't know. I attended Game 6 of the 1988 NBA Finals at the Fabulous Forum in Los Angeles, and when Isaiah Thomas gutted it up and played with what looked like a really bad ankle injury. Am I right about that?
It was bad.
It was bad, okay? And I believe you scored 25 in the third quarter alone.
Third quarter.
Whew, 25. And lost the game, unfortunately, by 1 point, 103-102. So after the game, talking to some of the other sports writers, I'm thinking, gee, wonder how hurt he really was, because there's no way for me to know or Carrie to know or Stephen A. to know, because we can't feel what you're feeling. Maybe your pain threshold is much higher than ours. We don't know. I'll never know. Back to Tony Parker last night. You realize he had torched the Blazers in games 1, 2, and 3. Damian Lillard and Wes Matthews had no chance against, no chance. He dribbled rings around both of them. He scored at will against both of them. But in Game 4 at Portland, they found some kryptonite. Out of desperation, they put his fellow countryman, Nicholas Batum, on him, who's a long, I think he's almost 6'8". And they played together for France. They won the Eurobasket Championship in the offseason, which is a big, big deal in Europe, especially in France. They beat their rival Spain. And these are like blood brothers, Batum and Tony. They're very close friends. Batum went to his house before Game 1 to see Tony's new baby. Batum knows every move in Tony's book. And he got in Tony's head in Game 4 when Portland blew out San Antonio. So last night, the game starts, and I told Stephen A. I was scared to death of this game. As Coach Pop said after the game, they were scared to death of this game. And Batum took Tony Parker completely out of this game. 10 minutes Tony lasted. He barely got up 2 shots. One was a shot clock 3 on a kick out that he just had to heave up, and another one was a forced up 5-foot jumper that almost got blocked. He had 0 points and 0 assists. And all of a sudden, about, 8.5 minutes left in the second quarter, they call timeout. He's in the huddle, and all of a sudden, you see Tony Parker just kind of back out of the huddle and start walking to the locker room. TNT said it looked at all of its footage, could find no point in any frame of the footage where it looked like Tony was a little gimpy or limpy on a hamstring. I don't know. Maybe he ripped it. I have no idea. Maybe it's bad. Maybe we'll hear today that the MRI says he's got a torn hamstring. I have no idea. But Batum humiliated him, his countrymen, and I think there was a little humiliation going on. I'm just guessing from a distance here. He walks to the locker room. R.C. Buford, the GM, goes after him, and he never comes back out. In a crucial game, because you don't want to have to go back up to Portland and play a Game 6 up there, Tony never came back out to the bench to root on his teammates, even with a strained hamstring. So here's my point. There is no way this team can think about winning the championship without Tony, but last night, I do not believe they would have won that game with Tony Parker. Because, listen, Patty Mills can play. And once the shock troops came in, Bellinelli, Manu, and all of a sudden the ball starts moving. Because with Tony, it is just dribble, 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 pick and roll, pick and roll. They might pick and roll 5 times in the same possession. It's hard for me to watch. But when he is on, look out. When he's not, you better look out San Antonio. So your thoughts on what you would read into this situation?
Well, the style, again, makes the fight. And you know, I agree with you. Tony was having a very difficult time with Batum. Batum is he's a lesser version of Scottie Pippen defensively.
He is. Yep.
And I could see where Tony would have a very difficult time with him because Tony isn't as great a shooter. You know, Mills coming into the game is a knockdown three-point shooter, can get it off. However, you know, from a hamstring standpoint, the athlete, when he's playing, the adrenaline that's pumping through your body, the endorphins that's flowing through your body, you can't replicate that in a non-basketball arena setting. So what Tony was probably experiencing, he could play through some of that stuff. You know, how he's feeling this morning, how he will be feeling tomorrow, you know, that's when the truth comes out.
Yep.
You know, and I remember my ankle, you know, there was endorphins and everything else. But the next day, I could barely walk. I really was on crutches. So we'll see when the adrenaline goes away and the endorphin levels goes down, what Tony is really like.
All right. Stephen A.
Well, when I think about what I saw last night, Skip, we all know how emotional and depressed you get when it comes to your Spurs. I mean, my Lord. If they're up by 15 points, you're stressed. That's not enough for you, okay? I'm going to tell you something, though. Here's where you need to be concerned. You should actually have enjoyed Tony Parker being out last night because you want to see what the Spurs are going to do. Because trust you me, if the Oklahoma City Thunder go up against San Antonio and San Antonio somehow is able to knock them off, Miami is going to be waiting. And one of the things they're going to do is put LeBron on Tony Parker.
They did last year.
Because they did last year. It worked effectively.
Yep.
And San Antonio being a pick-and-roll team when Tony Parker is on the court, it proved to be problematic as the series waned. And that's what you can't afford to happen this time around. If you're Greg Popovich, you need the Kawhi Leonard to elevate his game both offensively and defensively. But you also need the Patty Mills of the world with the Bellinellis, with the Manu Ginobilis, to be able to come into the game and to run your offense fluidly without Tony Parker. If you can't do that, you're not winning the championship.
Yep.
So for me, even though I think you need Tony Parker to win it, I also think you need to show and prove that significant chunks of minutes could be played with a strong level of effectiveness without him in order to beat Miami. Because Miami is not going to let Tony Parker beat them.
Yep.
They're too gifted. He might win a game for you like he did in Game 1 last year in the NBA
He won
Finals.
Game 1. Yep.
But he's not going to do that over the course of an entire series. As the series wanes, they're going to stymie him and dare somebody else to beat them. And in order to do that, they're going to dare San Antonio to run their offense without Tony Parker. So you actually should have been happy that Tony Parker was not in the game, and you need to wish for more of that during the conference finals to see what San Antonio is capable of doing without him on the floor.
Yeah, that's if they can get by Oklahoma City in the conference finals.
I want to see what they can do against Oklahoma City without him on the floor.
Last quick point. I remind you, something is always wrong with Tony Parker. He does take a lot of abuse in the lane. He gets knocked down a lot, almost Iverson-esque sometimes. But remember going into Game 1 of the finals last year, he had a hamstring problem. He was iffy for Game 1, and he played great in Game 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to take a moment out to say thank you for making First Take a trending topic on Twitter. Obviously, it's because of you. You're here. We appreciate it.
What's trending?
Thank you.
Just us, First Take.
Carrie Champion?
Don't soup his head up. I mean, it's true, but you ain't got to tell him that. You ain't got to tell Isaiah that, Carrie.
I want to be friendly to our guests. Can I not?
Keep it to yourself.
Oh, all right.
I'm just going to say thank you and thank you.
Don't be so mean. I don't like this. I don't like it. I want to be nice to you.
You should hear the things that he really says to me when we're not on television. Zeke, I'm your friend, but I'm going to keep it real.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The Miami Heat have won the 2013 NBA title.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World Series.
The full championship series.
The tide has risen again, the third time in 4 years.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
Steve Kerr with a stunner, in quotes. Media reports said he was close to a deal with the Knicks as of Monday, but last night it was announced Kerr decided to go with the Warriors. 5 years, $25 million deal. Kerr said it was a tough decision, but ultimately he didn't want to be 3,000 miles away from his family. And the Golden State Warriors just have talent. Can't beat that. We asked a former head coach, how good of a coach do you think Steve Kerr will be?
I think he's got a shot at being excellent, and I really do, because I think the Golden State Warriors fits him as a coach. It's a guard-heavy team. He understands guard play. It's a perimeter-oriented team. It's a young team that has some playoff experience. And I think from a comfort standpoint, he knows the lay of the land. You know, he's not traveling to a city where he's got to figure out how to get to point A, from point A to point B, all those domestic things that you have to figure out when you move. He won't have to figure those things out, so those won't be a hindrance. You know, his daughter is right there at my alma mater, so I got to give Berkeley a shout out. You know, go Cal. You know, so it's comforting for him to be there, and I think his communication skills with the guards will be good. However, he does have a tough locker room that he's going to have to win over, as you pointed out, because those players loved and played their hearts out for Mark Jackson. And that's what you want in a coach. You want a coach that players love to play for. You want a coach that players will play hard for and give their all to. I mean, that's coaching. And when you look at Mark Jackson, he's a value-based coach. He's an old-fashioned coach. And coaches like myself, Coach Knight, the Lombardis, they were value-based coaches who believed in you make the man. Like Tom Landry was that kind of coach. You know, Mike Dicker was that kind of coach. And then we have some analytical coach or statistical coaches, which are two different kind of philosophies. So what type of philosophy will Kerr bring to the locker room? Is he going to be a values-based coach, or is he going to be a statistical, analytical-based coach?
Skip pointed this out, that you two are both former players with no coaching experience. So for you, is that really a big deal or no big deal?
Well, as players, we get no credit for time on the job. And what I mean by time on the job, we have studied the game of basketball since grade school. We've watched more film than any new coach coming into the game. We've put in more hours, so we understand the game now. Can you educate and teach? Can you take the knowledge out of your head and put it into somebody else's? And can you do it in a short period of time? That's why the old coaches had to be educators. they had to be teachers. They had to go and get their masters so they can educate and they can teach. Now with the new coaches, can Kerr take what's inside his head and put it in somebody else's head and do it in a short period of time? Can he teach in the classroom? And that's going to be the test.
Stephen A.
I think Steve Kerr has got a shot to do a wonderful job. I wish him luck. I think he deserves the opportunity to be a head coach in this league, considering his 5 championship rings, the fact that he was a part of something, and that, you've seen guys who've never coached before get an opportunity. My issue and my critique involving the Steve Kerr allure has little to do with Steve Kerr. I wish him luck, and I want to congratulate him on the air right now. My issue is that you've never coached a day in your life, but you are the candidate for multiple jobs. To me, that's not about Steve Kerr. That's about something that's going on in the NBA that I'm not sure we're really highlighting. And so for me, I would ask you the question, Isaiah Thomas, what direction do you think this league is going in? We're seeing Mike Woodson gone, Mo Cheeks gone, Lionel Hollins gone, Mark Jackson gone, Mike Brown gone. A list goes on. And I'm seeing their replacements, and I'm not seeing diversity, and I'm certainly not seeing, quote unquote, the criteria that was once required in order for you to ultimately get a head coaching job. It's one thing, like I said, for Steve Kerr to have a job opportunity available for him because of the connection that he had. But as I wrote my column today, if schmoozing with dudes in influential positions was a class on a college campus, Steve Kerr is the ultimate professor being coveted by every institution of higher learning in this country, because it's like he's the golden boy. And I don't understand that. I'm happy for him. I think he'll do a good job. I think he deserves a job. But to be a candidate for a multitude of jobs without any experience, I don't like the kind of message that's saying. That's telling me that the NBA is going in a direction, dare I say, it used to be in a long, long time ago. I'd like to know your response to that, Zeke.
Well, if we were to use a Twitter analogy, it's definitely trending that way. But I think you hit on an important point, and that's the criteria that black coaches and black executives find themselves in, not only in the NBA, but also in college and also in sports in general, football, basketball, baseball. The black executive, the black coach is asking, what is the criteria that we are being judged and evaluated on? So if you take a Lionel Hollins and you take a Mark Jackson, for example, what's the criteria that those two gentlemen were judged on and based on their firing? And you can also throw in, Vinny Del Negro, right? Vinny Del Negro last year. Fair. What was the criteria that he was judged on? And most coaches around the league, in the NBA and college, Tubby Smith is a great friend of mine, a mentor of mine, someone that we all look up to, won championships in Kentucky, was doing a great job in Minnesota. What was the criteria for him being replaced and let go? And so you find yourself asking what is going on, and that's a very fair question, and it needs to be put on the table. It needs to be studied, and that question needs to be asked.
That's why I just did it. And that's exactly why I did
it. And you're the only one. God bless you, and we thank you for being here to kind of put it on the table, because these things that lay underneath the surface need to be elevated and talked about and discussed in an open forum, not necessarily behind closed doors.
Okay, I say God bless you both for bringing up and underscoring this issue on this show, because it needs to be discussed so that it makes people open their eyes and their minds and let it go in their brains and say, wait a second, what is going on here? Now, let's get back to what just happened. This was a rare phenomenon that just occurred, and it started with the great Phil Jackson. Let's just backtrack here. And this is beyond the diversity issue to me. Would Steve Kerr have been nearly as interesting and alluring as Stephen A. just said for Golden State if Phil had not blessed Steve Kerr by reportedly making him the candidate to be the next Knicks coach? Seriously. And I had a flash last night because, as you know, we used to talk when I was in Chicago, and so I spent some time around Phil Jackson.
I used to listen.
Okay.
You talk.
Yeah. I did talk a lot. But the Zen master, as he's called, can be the spin master. There's some diabolical genius to this man. So I had a flash last night, as far-fetched as this might seem, that I thought, did Phil make this happen for Steve because he loves Steve? And he thought, hey, if I woo Steve, if we're negotiating, maybe I can put Steve on the national map, and maybe the Lakers or Golden State or Utah or somebody will actually hire Steve to be their head coach. Now, did that? I have no idea. But it started to feel like that because Golden State wouldn't have been nearly as hot on Steve Kerr if not for Phil. Am I right?
You know, the old coaches, and that's where we talk about philosophy and philosophical and the way they thought about the game. They help their players, and they elevate them,
Sure.
and they bring them to a level. Just like Larry Brown and Coach Knight is fighting for Mike Woodson to get another job,
Yeah.
and they're saying that Mike Woodson is, you know, that's the old philosophical way that coaches approach the game. And I have no doubt in my mind that someplace in your story that Phil Jackson definitely wanted to elevate Steve Kerr.
He did. Yes.
And he's happy for him that he's got a job, that he's making money,
Sure.
but he's also disappointed, too, that he's not with him.
Okay, let's bring it full circle back to your original question.
Sure.
How good a coach will he be? This is my one sticking point on Steve Kerr, and he was in Chicago when we were there and spent some time around him. Terrific basketball mind. Extremely nice guy. Isaiah Thomas, really nice guy. But underneath nice guy and smile, I know that there's assassin underneath there because I saw it when you played. I'm not sure there's that in Steve Kerr. So can you be a highly successful NBA coach if you don't have something down in there that can produce a little bit of fear factor in your locker room? I know Steve will be loved by his owner and his CEO and his GM. They love him because he's fun to be around. He's a great guy. But will the players respond to only nice guy? Right? Are you with me?
Yeah, you can't have great discipline with niceness. Fear, you need to motivate a little bit by fear to have the type of discipline that you want in the locker room and out on the floor. Now, Phil Jackson, with his philosophy, with his rings and his credibility, he can come from a gentle, compassionate place in terms of nurturing. The new coach on the block who doesn't have the pedigree and the championships, you got to come in with the hammer, and you got to lay it down quick.
What kind of a guy goes to every city, has sex with every girl, then he catches HIV? And is that someone we want to respect and tell our kids about? I think he should be ashamed of himself. I think he should go into the background. What does he do? He works with the Dodgers.
Well, he's got a
do you
business,
know what
he
I
owns
do?
Movie
I
theaters
spend millions on giving away and helping minorities. Does he do that? That's one problem I have. Jews, when they get successful, they will help their people. And some of the African Americans, maybe I'll get in trouble again, they don't want to help anybody.
Magic Johnson responded to Donald Sterling's comments in an interview in CNN's Anderson Cooper. Magic said Donald Sterling is living in the Stone Ages, and he actually feels sorry for him. In short, back at the desk with Isaiah Thomas, obviously you've been following the situation. Who hasn't? We want to get your take on everything that's happened.
Well, there are a lot of different stories that are going on at the same time within one. But first, I'd like to say this about Magic Johnson. You know, Magic Johnson was knocked down at the zenith of his career. And I don't think there's been a person in my lifetime that you can admire more from getting knocked down to where he was and to where he's at now. You have to admire what he's done, how he's done it, and where he started from. So you have to admire everything that he's done with his life since that point, and all of us who were around knew the type of, situation that we were thinking and experiencing at that time. So where he's at today, I mean, you have to tip your hat and say, hey, job well done. Now, from a perspective of Sterling and the racialization that he's talking in the language that he's put out or that has rolled out into the public, it's not good for sports. Sports is the place where we want a pure society. Sports is the place where society comes to have these type of hard discussions, because in the locker room and on the playing field, this is the place where everything is even. This is the place where everything is level. Black, white, we can congregate in one place. We can talk, and we can share stories and ideas about how society is supposed to be. What we find ourselves in right now is that all sport has become tainted by the racialization talk. So therefore, we have to get this racialization talk out of sport, out of basketball, out of football, out of our language, because this is the place where it's supposed to be pure. Now, in getting it out of sport, we still need to have the larger conversation in society about what these words mean and how we are interacting with each other as a society. And I'll quote Michael Omi, who is one of the professors at Cal, when and I'll paraphrase where he say, race is an interesting concept that brings with it, a hotbed of tempers, heat, people get fired, so forth and so on, when you have this conceptual talk and discussion about race, because from his studies and what he's saying is that, is race really real, or is it a constructed box that we find ourselves having to gravitate to, be born in, and be labeled in? So the constructed box of race, stereotypes, all those things need to be talked about outside of the sport, and we need to get racism and all that stuff out of our sport, because sport is a place where we transport our culture. Sport is a place where we transport entertainment, our beliefs, our values, our system of learning. Sport is the place that we introduce our kids to society. We give them a basketball before we give them a book. We teach them how to play and interact with each other before we teach them how to read. That's why this discussion is needed, and we need to continue it, but we need to get it out of our sport.
Well, I don't disagree with anything that you say, and I appreciate the education. But I want to bring something home and really get and delve into something that he said about Magic Johnson as it pertains to accusations that he doesn't do anything for his community. You're one of the few, a lot of people don't recognize this about you, Isaiah, but you retired, I believe, in 1994. I believe it was in the month of April. By June, you were a 10% owner of the Toronto Raptors. You've been an entrepreneur for years. You're going to be fine whether you're playing or you're coaching or doing something in the game of basketball or not. According to my sources, you can deny it if you want, or you can confirm it. I'm hearing that you're pursuing an ownership stake in the Detroit Pistons. So I guess for me, knowing how successful you've been, knowing what that kind of image does for folks in minority communities, not just in Chicago where you're from, but throughout this nation, then I look at Magic with the Starbucks and the Burger Kings and the Magic Johnson movie theaters, and the list goes on and on. How did it hit you when you heard Donald Sterling say that not only does Magic Johnson not do for his community, but most black folks don't want to do anything for their own community? Your response to that?
It's twofold. So I'll take the Magic question first, and I'll put myself back in when I was a child growing up on the west side of Chicago who was living below the poverty line. And an image like Magic, an image like Muhammad Ali, an image like Bill Russell, I needed hope. I needed someone to look up to. So that was an inspiring image. So Magic is an inspiration because he is Irvin Magic Johnson. So to the kids who may not know him, may not know his story, they do have someone that they can hope and dream to be. So that's the Magic question. In terms of African Americans not doing anything for our community and not coming together, that's a larger question because there are systemic and structural issues that we have to discuss outside of society. Because there was a time in this country, and when we're talking about America, when African Americans did gather, they did come together, and they talked about having economic power. They talked about having their own banks. When you talk about a Marcus Garvey, when he was thinking the way he was thinking, those were dangerous thoughts at that time, and people died. People got killed. People got murdered. Our country wasn't ready for African Americans to come together and talk about housing, talk about education, talk about employment, talking about financial resources, pooling ourselves together. In America, that was seen as dangerous.
Yep.
Now, can we have that conversation today? Absolutely. Donald Sterling has opened the door for us to have that conversation about supporting Kathy Hughes on TV One.
Sure.
And not being ashamed or afraid to gather around her and support her and uplift TV One, so we have a communications platform that we can get our voices out. So these conversations are good. We need to have the debate, and we need to open it up.
Well said.
Okay, let's go bigger picture and back to the topic at hand that Stephen A. and I talk about day after day. And Stephen A. issued a warning yesterday that something better happen pretty quickly. A vote needs to be taken among the owners to oust Donald Sterling, or there's going to be a problem. There could even be a problem down the line in these playoffs. So if you were a player today or a leader of the Players Association today, how would you feel about the bigger picture of, we read all the stories about Mrs. Sterling could file for divorce, he could file for divorce, this could get hung up in court for 2 or 3 years. How would you feel about that?
If I was leading the Players Association right now, I would want to elevate this to a higher level. And what type of structural changes can we have that will really make some futuristic sense, and that will have some long-lasting impact. Donald Sterling being kicked out as an owner, he needs to go, and he will go, and there will probably be some litigation. There'll be some conversation about it. However,
would you be patient with that?
Well, you have to be patient because it goes through the court system, and now they missed their opportunity in terms of being what's the word I'm looking for, in terms of having the knockout punch. The knockout punch is when Golden State and the Clippers were playing. They should have boycotted then and said, we're not playing. And they should have shut the league down for those 2 or 3 days and said, we're not playing until this team is sold. Now, the team would have been sold in 3 or 4 days because the sponsors were pulling out. So you miss your moment.
That's an interesting
you miss your moment.
I have not heard that.
Now that you've missed your moment, now you got to come back and wait and let the process play it out. Now, the older guys, back in the day, the Kareems, the Jim Browns, they didn't miss their moment. Bill Russell didn't miss their moment. They didn't play. They shut it down and said, until we get change, structural and community-wise, we're not playing. So I think the players of today missed their moment.
Last quick comment. Bottom line is simple. Adam Silver banned him for life, but in the end, not only does there need to be a vote quick, fast, and in a hurry, but it needs to be unanimous. The players need to look at the league and its owners and say, okay, they did everything they could. They're saying that about Adam Silver. Now they need to be able to say that about the owners. Because if one owner votes in favor of Donald Sterling staying, it's going to be a problem.
Knicks still looking for a head coach after Steve Kerr decided to go to the Golden State Warriors and coach them. Ramona Shelburne is reporting that they're considering Derek Fisher or perhaps Kurt Rambis as potential head coaches. Former head coach, Knicks, tell me, sir, who do you think they should go with?
Well, you have to start with Phil Jackson and his philosophy of basketball, and you say, why are those guys two candidates, and why was Steve Kerr a candidate? Again, the triangle, his beliefs, the way he thinks the game should be played, he's trying to find the philosophical guys who think the way he does. I said this before, and I'll say it again. The coach that he had in Mike Woodson, I came up under Coach Knight. I came up under, his philosophy, his way of thinking. Mike Woodson, in my opinion, would be a perfect fit for him. They also got a coach there in Bill Laimbeer that I think would understand his concepts, could teach the triangle, his philosophy, so forth and so on. Now, so Phil's pool of talent, because of his philosophical beliefs, are very limited. He doesn't have a big swath to play with in terms of I can take a Mark Jackson, I can take a this guy, it's hard for him to find the right people who thinks the way he thinks the game and the way he wants to see the game played. So Mark Jackson is a great coach, but does he and Phil mesh philosophically? No. I would say no. Now Mark Jackson Mark Jackson with Pat Riley, their philosophies match. So again, trying to find the right philosophical fits is going to be his problem in terms of the way he wants to see the game played.
Okay. Stephen A.
Well, I personally believe that Mark Jackson would be a fit because I think that with Phil Jackson running the New York Knicks in the dysfunctional environment that exists in Madison Square Garden and New York City, you have to have somebody who can understand, comprehend, and incorporate the things that Phil Jackson wants to.
They just fired him. That would be Mike Woodson. Yeah.
But I'm saying, but at the same time, be his own guy. I love Mike Woodson. I want Mike Woodson to be a head coach in this league again. And I thought the fix was in, and he was set up by the Knicks to fail from day one last year. And I said that on many, many occasions publicly. But because of the year that Mike Woodson had last season, and because of the links that the New York Knicks went through to bring in Phil Jackson, even to the point where they relatively undermined Mike Woodson because they offered Phil Jackson a head coaching job, and then when he turned it down but accepted the presidency, James Dolan went on a Michael Kay show on ESPN New York, 98.7 FM, and said, yeah, I offered him the head coaching job, even though Mike Woodson was still his head coach. I mean, just total disrespect. And so when you go through all of that, and you've basically sent the message to a city how little regard you had for somebody who had won 54 games for you the previous year and took you to the semifinals and beyond the first round for the first time in 13 years. To me, Mike Woodson deserves to be in a better environment, which is why Phil Jackson let him go, because Phil Jackson said, got nothing but respect for you, but I want to have my own guy. Derek Fisher is a better candidate for me than a Kurt Rambis, because when I see Kurt Rambis, I see L.A. I don't see New York.
I would agree.
I don't see New York.
I would agree with Fisher.
But you also Phil is his own guy, and we know that. We don't need an extension of Phil on the sidelines. We need Phil on the sidelines. But if it's not going to be Phil on the sidelines, then we need somebody New Yorkers can relate to. New Yorkers will be galvanized over. New Yorkers will support, because Phil is approaching 70. He's got bad hips. Says he doesn't want to coach. We don't know how much patience health-wise he's going to have to deal with your former boss in Dolan and that dysfunctional environment in Madison Square Garden. But Mark Jackson can, and that's why he's my candidate.
Stephen A. Smith, If I gave you a choice, would you rather have Phil Jackson as your GM or Mark Jackson as your head coach?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I would say to you, it depends on who the owner is.
I think you'd rather have Mark Jackson as your head coach.
No, I would rather have Mark Jackson as my head coach than Phil as an executive under normal circumstances. But in Madison Square Garden, you need Phil more than you need Mark.
Okay, but it might boil down to, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, Melo would be more inclined to stay with Mark Jackson than with Phil Jackson as the CEO or the GM.
I believe that. I believe that.
Well, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Wow.
So, one great point guard to the other. Irvin Magic Johnson tweets, I'm really enjoying my friend and Hall of Famer Isaiah Thomas on ESPN First Take with Kerry, Skip, and Stephen A.
Wow.
Way to go, Irv.
He watches this show religiously.
We all do. I'm telling you, this is the show to watch. This show is on in the barbershop. I'm telling you. Everybody watches you guys.
And you know
love
what,
you.
Stephen A., I don't need you anymore. I got Isaiah now. So you just stay in L.A. He's going to be my new partner.
Yeah.
You could keep thinking that if you want to. Evidently, you have no clue about Isaiah Thomas's schedule because he's never around. You think I'm traveling? Check him out.
Yeah.
He'd be doing the show from all over the country, huh? Like, just so you couldn't catch him? Is that what you're saying, Stephen A.?
That's right. Exactly. As a matter of fact, I think Isaiah got a private jet. He didn't tell us about it yet.
Uh-oh.
He didn't tell us
you got
about
the
it.
private jet.
I need one.
Yeah, I heard you talking about it.
The big jerky guy has a private jet?
Yes, he does. He's down in South Beach more than you think.
Isaiah Thomas, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining the
It's an
show.
honor.
It was
Thanks
an
so much,
honor
bro.
and a pleasure. You
Thank
really
you.
upgraded
you.
us today. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can catch First Take Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on ESPN2.